Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are in the world. Talent Finders would like to welcome founder and president at NHP Talent Group and host at hashtag the podcast Top Global, Adam Posner. So welcome, Adam.
Karen, pleasure to meet you and join your show.
Thank you. So Adam, I'd like to congratulate you on all your achievements. So can you share with us how your entrepreneurial journey started?
Yeah, well, that's a long story. So as I like to say here, long story short, and I'll keep it short and sweet for your audience here. So a little bit on my background, born and raised here in Brooklyn, New York, something I take a lot of pride of. And I knew coming out of university, I was going to go into business, communication, advertising. And that's exactly what I did. So for the first 15 years of my career, I worked in industry, in advertising, marketing, and media. I worked at various ad agencies. I worked at various companies such as American Express and Sirius XM Satellite Radio, which is a big telecommunications satellite radio company here. So I worked on the marketing side. And my last stop before I ventured into the world of recruitment, I was working for Gary Vaynerchuk over at VaynerMedia. Turns out I wasn't, the grass wasn't greener on the other side. I ended up losing my job, and that caused me to have to really take a step back and figure out what I wanted to do in my life moving forward, my professional life. And with Gary's guidance and following my passions and strengths, I moved into the world of recruiting. So the first 2 years of recruiting, I worked at 2 different search firms, learned the art and science of recruiting. And then almost 5 years ago, I said, you know what? I am done working for other people. I want to go do this on my own. And that's when I went out and I launched NHP Talent Group. And I am the proud founder and owner. And we are a boutique staffing firm servicing the marketing, media, advertising, and media industries. And that's the start and the origin story of my entrepreneurial journey.
That's amazing.
That was pretty quick, right? I said that pretty short. I mean, that's that's like 17 years of experience in a minute. Yes.
Yeah. So you've obviously had quite a diverse career. And after 15 years in the ad and marketing industry, and obviously you did mention you were with Vayner, you left and pivoted into your own career, launching your recruiting and consulting. What was that transition like for you? And do you believe that the experience helped you when starting your own business? And what do you believe you do better?
Well, 100%. And I'm truly of the mindset, for me specifically, and everybody has their own journey. I would not be as successful and I would not be in the position I am in now and the upward trajectory if I didn't have that 15 plus years behind me of experience, that 17 years of experience behind me, to learn how to operate as an operator, to learn how to be a leader, to learn how to build, manage, and grow a business. So I think that was essential. Now, there's many folks out there who hit the ground running in their own entrepreneurship journey much earlier on in life, in their late teens, early 20s, and they learn on the job. And I did a ton of learning on the job too, but I also had a distinct advantage of all that experience behind me.
Yeah. So within that, what would you say some of your biggest lessons and learnings have been within your career?
Ooh, that's a big one too.
And you probably had multiple, maybe, but maybe there's like a few that stand out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one that's really important is to trust your gut. A lot of times early on in my career, when I was not having a lot of success, I was able to almost feel the negativity. I was almost able to feel when something was not going right in my career. And that would almost be a self-fulfilling prophecy with diminishing returns. And I've learned to turn that around really and trust my gut, trust my instinct, and actually flip that and bet and double down on myself. Always bet on myself. Trust my gut, know that I'm going in the right direction. I think that was a really big shift for me once I went out on my own, once I started working for myself and I was my own boss. Of course I have clients, Karen. Of course, you know, there's people that, you know, but they're not my bosses, and I am my own boss. And I have that freedom to do. So that was, yeah, it was a tremendous difference. That was a huge lesson learned. And I also learned how to be a leader. I truly believe that not everybody is meant to be in a leadership position. There are so many people out there that are just better at being individual contributors, and that's their contribution. So when I see folks getting promoted just for the sake of promoting and they're having leadership put on top of them, some of them aren't ready for that, and some of them don't want that. So a big lesson there is understanding who can be and who should be in a people leadership position, and then embracing it. And then for myself, you know, it really was about learning how to be a leader. And I did that by looking back again on my experience of all the great leaders that I worked for, as well as some of the leaders that weren't so great, and trying not to emulate what they do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Can you share with us more about NHP Talent Group for those who don't know what you do? If you could just
Yeah,
elaborate.
absolutely. So we are a boutique staffing consultancy located here in New York, and we service the entire United States. And we focus on roles within advertising, marketing, and media. So these positions can be account management, strategy, creative, UI, UX, product management, product marketing. We also recently just launched yesterday a new division of our company called Probably Nothing Talent, specializing in all things Web3. So that's crypto, blockchain, NFT. So we're expanding
Oh,
the company.
wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
pretty exciting. Yeah, thank you. We just launched yesterday. Really exciting. And what we do differently is we don't do contingency. I moved away from contingency about 5 years ago. That model did not work for me, and it did not work for my clients. I was not able, Karen, to when I lost a couple of roles, it didn't sit well with me, the
Mm.
concept of not getting paid for my time.
No,
Because,
exactly.
and not to say that works for a lot of people, but what I also found more importantly was my clients valued the consultancy hourly based model, because we switched the paradigm from being viewed as a vendor to being viewed as a partner. And it wasn't just the recruiting that we do, but we also consult on onboarding. We consult on the candidate experience and the entire process. So it's much more encompassing of the full recruitment and talent acquisition journey than just putting warm butts in a seat.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what would you say some of your biggest career highlights have been, or what stands out for you the most? And maybe again, you've had multiple, but is there anything
Yeah.
that specifically stands out?
Yeah, there's two of them. One of them, first and foremost, is in this past year in 2021, I made my first full-time hire, hiring Kevin Logan Jr. to be my director of recruitment, and that was really big for me because right now, as of now, I mean, I have anywhere from 7 to 10 freelance recruiters that work for NHP Talent Group on and off various hours. But Kevin is my first full-time 40-hour-a-week hire. And that was big for me,
Yes.
for an entrepreneur, for a solo business owner to expand my team. That was tremendous. The other big highlight for me, as I mentioned yesterday, was launching my second division based on need in the marketplace, taking advantage of a white space and just going for it. And that was really big for me to say, screw it. You know what? I'm going to put the time, the money, and the investment in and really take advantage of this white space recruitment opportunity. And the third is the way my company and myself succeeded and grew during the pandemic. A lot of people, their businesses folded, sometimes for external reasons, and some because they allowed it to.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
didn't push forward to it. And I received some advice from my recruitment mentor, a gentleman by the name of Joe Mullings, who's been a leader in the med tech recruiting space here in the States for 30 years. And I go back to March 2020, and I was having a conversation with him right at the start of the pandemic. And he said, Adam, listen, you have two choices right now. You could either curl up in a ball and die, figuratively speaking,
Yeah.
or you could take advantage of this pandemic and continue to be invaluable to your clients and candidates.
Yeah.
And invaluable is a word that really was etched inside of me, because that means there may or may not be business at that time, but you're continuing to provide value to your clients, candidates, and audience when there's no business to be had.
Yeah.
So fast forward to when the vaccine started to come out and business started to pick back up again. Who did all those clients turn to? They turned to me.
Yeah.
Because I was top of mind for them.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point, is you've got to be
Yeah.
front and center all the time.
100%.
So you did touch on the word, or touch around the subject leadership earlier, but I want to talk about leadership, or the lack of leadership, from both an entrepreneurial and global perspective. So what do you believe separates you from your competitors? And what do you believe needs to change the current narrative? And can you give us some examples that you've done within your own business?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting too, because I've learned from the best, and I've learned through watching by example. I mean, that's really the way I learn. And people throw around, it sounds very buzzworthy to say people first, but it really means listening.
Yes.
Listening to your team, listening to their needs and their wants, because in this market, people could get up and leave and do whatever the heck they want. They don't owe you anything.
Yeah, there's no real loyalty anymore.
No, there isn't loyalty. So how do you establish loyalty? And loyalty is a two-way street. The best folks that I've worked for have shown loyalty in both directions. And as a leader and as an employer, the way that I show loyalty, it's not just compensation and not just taking care of them and their families and everything too, but it's really listening to what their needs are from a career growth perspective. I think that's really one point that's really critical. The other point that's really critical is providing air cover. Always having your back. And I go back to an example of one of my favorite leaders. I was working about 10, 11 years ago at an agency called Irwin Penland. Now it's called EP here in the States. It's an ad and marketing agency. And I had a tremendous leader. Her name is Justina Omakwa. And she said something really critical to me. She said, listen, I'm always going to have your back no matter what, but you need to defend your point of view. If you're going into a client meeting or you're pitching something internally, pitch it with confidence, pitch it with data, pitch it with storytelling. And even if you're wrong, as long as you do that, I'm going to have your back because you made that effort. But if you're just bullshitting me and bullshitting everybody else, that's not going to work. No. So that's something I really, took to heart. And that kind of rolls up to this concept of air cover. I'm always going to provide air cover to my team. I'm always going to be the bad cop when they need one. That's my job. My job is to protect them and insulate them, but at the same time, also give them room to grow and develop, take risks and fail. Yes. And I support failure, right? And I'm a big believer in, mistakes. Mistakes happen, embrace them, learn from them. And if you repeat them, there's a certain, kind of wiggle room, right? Like depending on the type of mistake, if you repeat it twice, hey, that's not good, right? No. But if it's a little bit harder thing, you're still learning and progressing, and it's less of a mistake, and I see that forward progress, then it's okay. We figure it out. Listen, we're only human.
Exactly. I think in it, people always had such a negative connotation towards failure, but I think people are having to reshape that narrative too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously you touched on the pandemic a bit earlier, but it obviously really turned our world upside down and created a lot of chaos and uncertainty. However, it has also created a lot of opportunity and given many people the opportunity to pivot. So can you share with us how this impacted you both personally and professionally? And can you give us any examples?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's really interesting. So prior to the pandemic, I was operating out of a small kind of WeWork space, not too far from my house. And it was kind of tough. It wasn't bad. It wasn't a bad thing, but every day I had to pack up my backpack with my computer and everything. I was recording the podcast out of a conference room, and it wasn't great. And I took advantage of an SBA loan, they call it here in the States, which is a business loan that they were giving out to small businesses during the pandemic to help them out. And I took advantage of those funds and I used it to invest in two ways. One, I used it to invest in professional career coaching. I said, there's a lot of things that I don't know as a small business owner. Certain processes, infrastructure, business development, communications pieces. So I invested into myself, and it was a hefty investment with a business coach that used to actually be a client of mine and a friend. And it turned out to be incredibly fantastic investment for me. The ROI has been, I'd say even tenfold from the amount of business and confidence that I have. So that was number one pivot, and not so much of a pivot, but taking advantage of the pandemic. And number two, I used that money to build out this office and studio that you see here, which is a home for me, where I feel comfortable, where I could expand the show, where I could do my work, where I'm not stuck in my house with my kids running around, where I don't have to drive 20 minutes to my shared office space. And now I'm 3 minutes from my office. And having that level of comfort enabled me to really focus on the work and the business. And I've succeeded and strived. I mean, incredible year-over-year growth for NHP Talent Group, year-over-year growth for the podcast during the pandemic. So I think I came out on top. I'm very confident to say that.
Absolutely. So you took your passion obviously a step further and started your own podcast called Podcast. So can you share with us more about this, and what was your motivation and purpose behind the podcast, and what makes you different from other podcasts? Because there's gazillions of podcasts now.
Well, what makes me different is, first of all, I'll answer that one. What makes me different is me. I take a ton of pride in my craft as a podcast host. I take a ton of pride in the art of storytelling, the preparation, the research, and the process. So that's first and foremost. So to hit the rewind button, it's 100% critical. And there's been shows that I've been on where a guest has not done, where the host has not done the proper research, and I'll call them out on that, because that's a waste of time for the guest.
Of course.
That really is a waste of time for a guest. And I also don't like when a host asks too many questions in advance by not doing their own research. I think that's a flawed approach as well there too, which is really interesting. So going back to the podcast story here real quickly, long story short, again, it was early 2019, and, podcasts, a lot of people were putting out podcasts around recruitment and HR, and they really honestly weren't really that good. They were kind of robotic. They really weren't good in storytelling. And I've always had this itch. To be a storyteller. I was always inspired by some of the great interviewers out there, Larry King, Howard Stern, from their interview skills. And I said, you know what, let me take a shot at this. I know I could do it. And I know I could put out a really good show. On top of that, I had a tremendous network of folks from my career that would just be amazing guests. Amazing guests.
Yeah, and it's the power of storytelling, without a doubt. that I feel.
Without a doubt, it was absolutely incredible. So I launched and I recorded my first show over Zoom, and I had a buddy that did some editing for me. And as they say, the rest is history. And now recorded over 220 episodes, aired 202 episodes, 3 years in, over 500,000 downloads, incredible audience feedback and engagement. And I love what I do. It's my passion. It's my art. It's my canvas to really showcase my guest stories and, watch, share their insights and wisdoms. And as a result, that light reflects and shines back on me.
Yeah, absolutely. So what would you say your long-term vision for your business and for the podcast is? Like, what is your ultimate vision, if you have one? Or
I think it's continuing to grow and share insights and just not better guests, but more diverse guests, more diverse stories, more diverse backgrounds. And for me to grow as a host, to continue to challenge and push myself with stories that might be out of my comfort zone.
yes, and probably subject matter too, I would
Exactly.
think. So going back to the pandemic, do you believe that this has raised a higher level of consciousness? And how do you believe that this has changed not only the future of business, but also how we build our business relationships? And do you believe this to be more positive than negative direction? Or do you think we're still in a transition? And what do you believe this will ultimately look like?
Yeah, and I think the biggest takeaway from the pandemic was it forced us to filter out all the fluff, the nonsense, the non-necessary BS in our life and focus. And you think about it from a personal and professional perspective here. And I'm speaking from my perspective as a husband and a father of 2 young kids.
Yes.
The pandemic, one, gave me more time with my children to connect with them, to be closer to them, which I think is amazing for so many parents out there. But there's also the flip side of that. That's also proven to be a great distraction of people working from home with 2 kids, forcing them to find ways to focus on that. So that really forced us to focus. The other part of it too, which I've seen across the board, especially being in recruitment, is people really took a step back and say, do I enjoy what I'm doing? Do I like what I'm doing? Is this what I want to be doing moving forward for the rest of my life and the rest of my career? And that was really the filter there. And that's really what triggered, I don't like to say the great resignation, I like to say the great migration.
Yes.
Because I think realistically, that's what it's. People migrated. They migrated from roles to roles. They migrated from full-time roles to, taking advantage of a side hustle that's turned into a passion, that's turned out to be a fruitful full-time career for them. So I think that's really what it's all about, the great migration.
Yes, absolutely. So mental health is a very big part of what we have to acknowledge and destigmatize. So how has this been for you and those individuals you work with? And what are some of the tools you have implemented within your own business and personally that can help you and your staff address this?
Yeah, mental health is an interesting one there too, because it's much more than a buzzword. And I think there's 2 different sides to it. I think mental health is about creating boundaries. And I think that's really the solution for myself. And because here's what happened during the pandemic. Most of us, I'm speaking in general terms here, we would get up, we say goodbye to our families, our loved ones, our partners, whatever, our cats, our dogs, if we're by ourselves, right? And we would go to the office. Most of us, some people, a lot of people work from home. And you had your time in your office, you left work at 5, you commuted home, and then you were done for the day. The pandemic has now forced so many of us to be on almost 24/7. We're accessible, we're reachable. I'm working in my house, my upstairs office until 6:30 at night. The dinner bell rings, I run downstairs. And it's like that. There's no transition time. There's no downtime. So I think it's really about creating boundaries. And that's something really important. For example, for myself, I make it a point typically from about 6:30 at night till about 9:30 at night when my daughter goes to sleep, my eldest, to be offline. My phone is away.
Yeah.
Right. And if
so important.
That important, you're creating boundaries so you can be present for your family. So I think the biggest thing about mental health, from my perspective as a non-expert, is creating those boundaries to protect your time. That is critical.
Absolutely. So you've interviewed some obviously very incredible talents. So when approaching these high caliber clients or guests, how do you approach each person for the interview?
It's truly built on relationships. And some of them, it's so crazy too, because there's some folks that I leverage connections and relationships for in the outreach, and some of them are cold outreach. So there's a big difference there. It's about showing value and interest. Why I think they would be great on my show, why I think they would be, beneficial to my audience, and just treating them with respect and being conscious of their time. That's really what it's about. And you know what? It also takes persistence. It takes a lot of follow-up, right? There's some guests that have taken a lot of hard work to book on the show, and it's worth it. And then there's
Yes.
other times too. For example, I had Bracken Darrell on my show. He is the CEO of Logitech, literally the camera that I'm looking to you in Logitech, who's a Fortune 100 CEO. And it took one message, one proper message and one email. And he said, I'd love to join you. And I find it fascinating that some of the most successful people who actually have the most
The
limited
least
amount of time are the most generous with their time versus
Yes.
some folks who, I don't want to say are lower than them because I never want to say that. But, from a career
They
perspective,
think they're more important.
yeah. And self-importance is something that really has to be abolished.
Yes, 100%.
Right. I mean, listen, there's a balance of it's a kind of a weird thing, right, Karen? It's like, it's one of those things where like, no one's time is more valuable than someone else's. That's a hard thing to say, right?
We all get the same amount.
Yeah, but just be mindful. Exactly.
So that leads me to the last question. What are the 3 key pieces of advice you would give to other entrepreneurs who are starting out? And what legacy would you like to leave, or how would you like to be remembered? Because some people don't like the word legacy. So.
No, I like the word legacy. So I'm gonna address the first one with some advice there. First and foremost, from a tactical perspective, plan your work and work your plan. I say this mantra to myself every single morning when I get up. Plan your work and work your plan. That's both my near-term tactical, the to-do things I need to do every single day to keep my business moving, plus the high-level strategy. That's what I say to keep myself focused and organized. That's number one. Number 2, as I mentioned earlier in the podcast interview, bet on yourself. Double down. Bet on your strengths and stop focusing on your weaknesses. Gary Vee said that to me. Is the greatest piece of advice. At this stage of my life and my career, right? It's one thing if you're in elementary school and you're not doing so well in math or science and you got to work on that, right? But at this stage of my life, I don't have time to fix the things that I'm not good at. Instead, I'm going to put my energy into the things that I'm amazing at and double down on that. The word legacy is something that I truly believe on. And this is how I sum up legacy. Very simply. My legacy is going to be leaving this world a better place than I found it in 2 different ways. One, by the people that I affected to make their lives better. And number 2, which should really be number 1 actually, is empowering my children to be better than my wife and myself.
Yeah.
They're going to make a bigger impact than me. That's my legacy.
Yes. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. So if people wish to connect with you, what are the best platforms to do so?
Absolutely. You can find me. I'm all over LinkedIn and Adam J. Posner. Please connect with me. I love to meet great new people. Please follow and check out the podcast at www.thepodcast.com. And for all your recruitment needs, you can check us out at nhptalentgroup.com.
Thank you so much. And hopefully we can have you back in the future.
Looking forward to it, Karen. Thank you so much. And thank you for your audience for spending time with us today.
Thank you.